All right, thank you for joining us today. We are talking about how God can change your situation and how he can change it pretty quickly. How is it we can do some amazing and sometimes unexplainable things, like heal our own bodies by the power of our thoughts? Mother's intuition, the law of attraction. Can we really tap into our subconscious mind? Can we really create our own realities? It begs the question, are we novice gods? Hey, welcome back to this documentary series that we're doing on Are We Novice Gods? Do we have more power within us that we can tap into? Do we have more power without that we can also tap into? Today is one of those spiritual discussions, and I have just one of my favorite friends, Tyson Thacker, who is a spiritual giant.
I don't know about that, Scott.
In comparison, anyway, he is just a fantastic example to me. If you didn't catch the previous episode that we did about turning your life over to God, make sure you check that out. He had some just amazing insight there. And today we're talking about how God can change your situation. Now, Tyson had an experience where his business wasn't going great, and then he turned his life over to God. And how many offices do you have now?
6 offices.
Okay, he's only got 6 offices, so he's still on the rise. Anyway, he's doing fantastic. So, and you can share some of your story if you want. What I'd like to know is, so I've been, and a lot of this documentary series is following my life as kind of a sub-theme here.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to discover things about how we can change our lives, how we have more power than we think, and we don't have to have that victim mindset. Well, in my life, and how we are actually creators. We create our own reality and attract into our lives the stuff that's in there, positive or negative.
Sure.
I have created a lot of negative stuff, and I'm working to figure out how to change that. So for the last 5 years, I've had a startup. I have a couple of businesses. One's doing okay, and the startup is not.
That's why it's a startup.
That's why it's a startup. It is just started and started and started. And it hasn't worked out yet. And so I'm trying to figure out how to turn my life over to God, how to turn my business over to Him, to where all the financial, all the marketing, all the business decisions I make with Him, with greater understanding. Mm-hmm. So that's what the last question was a lot about. But in doing that, I kind of want to have some hope that God can change my situation. And part of it is that I get so focused on my lack, on what I'm missing, and I get so focused on that, and I believe that I'm then creating more of that lack. Mm-hmm. And so I got to figure this out in a way that I can focus on abundance, even though I don't see the immediate evidences of that,
Sure.
If that makes sense. So what can you do to help me just, not solving my problem for me, but just sharing insights that will give me hope?
Well, one of the big things that I believe is that we need to partner with God. And in the last episode, we talked a little bit about how to do that through our scripture study and through our prayer. Mm-hmm. Part of what you're really talking about with what you just brought up is mindset and helping to change that mindset. And really, how do we create a godlike mindset is really what you're asking, because God is all powerful. God can do all things. Now that doesn't mean that we try to become God necessarily. It means that we have the ability to partner with Him and to think more like Him. Mm-hmm. Because what you said was we live in this fallen world where we all are a victim of how we were raised. Not that your parents didn't do a great job, or the things and experiences that we've picked up along the way. And the reality of it is if we can either choose to turn to God or turn away from God. If we turn away from God, we're really just focusing on our own power. Mm-hmm. And as we focus on our own power, that's not going to take us in the direction that we really want, because realistically, God needs to be our partner to really have any success in our lives. Any success that I've ever had, I can attribute to God helping me to make those things happen, because I've had plenty of situations where I've tried to do it alone. So going back to my own example of when I started this new business, had been successful, I had made enough money that I could retire. I felt like God told me, hey, you need to take this next step. You need to train all these people on what you did. That wasn't working. And so I said, okay, God, you told me that I needed to do these things, but I must be relying too much on my own power now. I looked back and I saw that I was. And so, very specifically, one of the things that I did was I said, I'm going to spend 45 minutes a day with personal scripture study, as well as personal business study in the areas that I was trying to move on with. And so I would always start out with my scripture study first. In the last episode, if you haven't listened or watched it, go back and I talked a little bit about how that scripture study really helped me. But what ended up happening is as I would write and write and write as this scripture study, I'd get all these ideas. And you have to trust, you have to understand that there's your voice that sometimes is in your head, and then there's God's voice. And you have to recognize when you're listening to God's voice versus listening to your own voice, because if you're listening to your voice only, that's when you start relying on your own power.
Okay.
And so here's how to differentiate between the two.
Okay.
First, if you're listening to your voice, that's where the doubt creeps in. That's where you start wondering if you can do this, if you are enough. If you're listening to God's voice, He is helping you to know that you are enough, and that it's either helping others through what you're doing and serving them. And isn't that what we really want to do in all of our careers, is really each day serve God? And we serve God by serving others. So it's always giving us more power. It's in a good way, in a godly way. It's also helping us to help others. So anything that leads you in a direction of power or of service, you know is from God. So as you are reading and studying your scriptures, and then it was the same thing with business study. If that was going to help me to help more people and create a new mindset of really making a good friend of mine by the name of Dan Sullivan talks about how we always should make our future brighter than our past. Well, the reality in that is we have to grow to do it, and we grow with God, and He teaches us and walks along that path with us if we allow ourselves to. And so following and listening to God instead of listening to our own voice is a big key in changing those mindsets.
Okay. So I think I have fallen into that trap you were talking about, where you think to where you're doing it more on your own power, you're relying more on your own than Him. I wonder if a lot of that has been I didn't want to burden Him, or maybe it's that I've been doubtful that I could get answers to prayer. I'm not really sure. I've got a lot of that stuff going on. How do I switch? How do I switch from relying on my power to totally relying on His?
So in the Sermon on the Mount, it talks about ask and you shall receive, knock and it shall be opened unto you. But you've got to believe. I call it the difference between belief and unbelief. The Lord wants us to test us to see if we will follow that. And so I would say it's a 30-day challenge that I'm going to give to you as well as to each of you watching, to do this for 30 days and to write the specific things down that you know you need to take action on, and then take action as quickly as you can, and then write down what happened as a result of that action. And I promise you that within 30 days, you'll see that unbelief diminish, because you'll see the hand of the Lord in your life in a way that's more powerful than you've ever seen before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want that. And I hope that you want that too. I hope that these ideas really help you. I mean, this is my own journey. I so appreciate you hopping into my little video journal, basically. But I hope this helps you kind of understand how we can turn it over to Him and really rely on His power. Can I ask you an additional question about prayer? So when you were having a conversation with Him, I mean, when you're having a prayer, is it a conversation?
Absolutely.
So you're not just telling Him, it's not just a one way?
There's too many times, Scott, where prayer is that one way. And you're so busy telling the Lord what you need, and it's your agenda.
Okay. I'm there.
That you never pause and listen. Just shut up and listen. And the very first voice that usually comes into your head is God's. He wants to speak to you. He wants to make sure that you have what you need because he loves you unconditionally. He's yours. And you're his, more importantly. And so as a result, take more time listening. Write down that question and then listen. And what comes into your mind? Write it down. It's an ongoing conversation that should be happening not only through that prayer, but through all day. That as you're listening, that he can be speaking to you and that you have the opportunity to respond by showing him the actions you're taking to make that happen in your life. And the more that you take that action, the more he'll realize that you're out of the unbelief phase and that you're believing, and he'll give you more and more and more direction. Got to take action.
Okay. And God can change your situation?
Always. Sometimes you got to go through some crap to get there, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'll take you through it just to make sure that you can see what you did. Because, when you talk about Abraham and what Abraham went through, the Lord already knows what you're going to do. He wants you to understand what you're going to do so that you can take that next step because you've now taken a positive step, trusted in him, and now you can take that next step with more courage and more faith.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. What I love is I can watch this again and again, and because I think there are so many nuggets there that I just maybe wasn't all totally ready to grasp, but I appreciate that you let me film this conversation. So anything you want to say just kind of in closing? Or
take that 30-day challenge and make that conversation a real conversation in prayer instead of your checklist and your agenda.
Okay. And I just will share, I got an answer to prayer just this last week that is one of those huge pivots in my life that I know I'm going to look back on and say, this is where it happened. And it all came because of asking those questions and being ready and looking for the answer. So I hope you do that. I hope you tune in for another one of these episodes. I hope you find these conversations meaningful. I think it's more interesting to have conversations about things that are truly meaningful than just kind of some of the regular stuff. But thank you so much for joining us today. What do you think? You've heard our thoughts. Now let's hear yours. In the comment section below, share what impressions came to your mind. What did you get out of this? If you have had thoughts to take action, please do so. Always listen to your inner voice. It's your ultimate guidance system. Of course, the best place to take action is at scottwilhite.com, because if you join me for a free web class, I will reward you by sending you my purpose planner so you can have a physical guide to help you get in touch with your inner guide. What if you are a God in the making? That would mean there's purpose to your life, meaning to your challenges. You have a great work to do. May you have the courage, faith, and power to become who you were truly meant to be. See you next time.